I stood in the kitchen, the weight of 40 years pressing against my chest, my hands trembling as I sliced tomatoes for dinner. The knife slipped, nicking my finger, and a bead of blood bloomed against the cutting board. I barely noticed. My mind was elsewhere, tangled in the silence that had grown between Richard and me, a silence that had once been comfortable but now felt like a chasm. Today was our 40th anniversary. 40 years of shared mornings, quiet evenings, and the kind of love that weathers storms or so I thought. I'd spent weeks planning, imagining a quiet celebration, just the two of us, reminiscing over wine and the photo albums I'd dusted off from the attic. I'd even bought a new dress, a soft blue one that hugged my frame the way it did when we were young. But Richard hadn't mentioned it. Not once. Not this morning when he shuffled out for coffee, not at lunch when he mumbled about work, not even now as he sat in the living room, flipping through channels like today was any other day. I wiped my hands on the dish towel, the sting of the cut grounding me, and walked to the doorway. "Richard," I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be. "Do you know what today is?" He didn't look up. The TV blared a car commercial, all gleaming chrome and false promises. "Tuesday, isn't it?" he said, his tone flat, distracted. I waited, expecting him to catch himself, to laugh and pull me into his arms like he used to. But he didn't. He just changed the channel. "It's our anniversary," I said, the words sharp now, cutting through the hum of the television. 40 years, Richard." He glanced at me, his brow furrowing like I'd interrupted something important. "Oh," he said, and then, with a shrug that felt like a slap, "It's just a number, Ellen. Not worth making a fuss over. Not worth making a fuss over." The words echoed in my head, each syllable a hammer against the fragile scaffolding of our life together. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my heart pounding so loud I thought he'd hear it. But he didn't. He just turned back to the TV, oblivious to the fracture he'd just caused. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the back of his head, the gray hair thinning at the crown, the man I'd loved for 4 decades reduced to a stranger in an armchair. The house around us, the one we'd built together, mortgage payments, late-night arguments over paint colors, the creaky floorboard in the hallway felt like a museum of someone else's life. I turned back to the kitchen, my hands shaking, not with sadness, but with something hotter, something dangerous. Anger. Betrayal. The kind that festers unnoticed until it demands to be felt. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside him, listening to his steady snores, each breath a reminder of his indifference. By morning, I made up my mind. If 40 years wasn't worth celebrating, then maybe this life we'd built wasn't worth keeping. The idea came to me like a spark in the dark. Sell the house. Sell it all. The walls that held our memories, the garden where we'd buried our old dog, the bedroom where our children were conceived. If he could dismiss our life so easily, then I'd take it away. I'd make him feel the weight of what he'd forgotten. The next day, I called a realtor. Her name was Diane, a brisk woman with a sharp smile and a clipboard that screamed efficiency. She walked through the house, her heels clicking on the hardwood, jotting notes about square footage and natural light. "This place has good bones," she said, peering out the bay window. "It'll sell fast." I nodded, my throat tight, as she listed the steps. Appraisals, listings, open houses. I didn't tell her why. I didn't tell her about the anniversary, about Richard's words, about the rage that had settled into my bones like a tenant refusing to leave. I just signed where she pointed, my signature a jagged slash across the page. When Richard came home that evening, I didn't mention it. I cooked dinner roast chicken, his favorite, and we ate in silence. He didn't notice the papers on the counter, didn't see the way my hands trembled when I passed him the salt. I waited, letting the secret simmer, letting it grow into something I could wield. Days turned into weeks, and the plan took shape. Diane worked fast, just as she'd promised. The house was listed, and soon, strangers were traipsing through our home, opening closets, testing faucets, imagining their lives in the spaces we'd filled with ours. Richard noticed the disruptions, of course. He grumbled about the open houses, about the for sale sign staked in the front yard. "What's this about, Ellen?" he asked one evening, holding up a real estate flyer like it was evidence of a crime. I looked at him, my heart a fist in my chest, and said, "You said it wasn't worth celebrating. So I figured the house wasn't worth keeping either." His face went slack, confusion giving way to something like fear. For the first time in years, I saw him really look at minute through me, not past me, but at me. "You're serious?" he asked, his voice low, almost pleading. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was in the papers, in the strangers walking through our home. in the way I'd stopped pretending everything was fine. That night, he didn't sleep in our bed. He took the guest room, the door clicking shut like a verdict. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd gone too far. But the anger was still there, a pulse beneath my skin, and it wouldn't let me back down. Not yet. The house sold faster than I expected. A young couple, newlyweds with bright eyes and big plans, made an offer above asking price. Diane called me with the news, her voice brimming with excitement. "Congratulations, Ellen," she said. "You're free." Free. The word felt foreign, like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. I signed the final papers in her office, my hands steady now, the weight of my decision settling into something solid, something real. When I told Richard, he didn't yell. He didn't beg. He just sat at the kitchen table, his hands folded, and said, "What now?" I didn't have an answer. Not then. But I knew one thing. I'd taken back something he'd tried to erase. Our life, our love, our home wasn't just a number. And I'd make him see that, even if it meant tearing it all down. The days after the sale were a blur of packing boxes and avoiding Richard's eyes. He moved through the house like a ghost, his footsteps heavy, his silence heavier. I caught him sometimes, standing in the doorway of the living room, staring at the spot where our old couch used to be. The couch was gone now, sold to a neighbor for $100. I didn't tell him I'd kept the photo albums, tucked them away in a box labeled miscellaneous, so he wouldn't know I wasn't ready to let go of everything. Not yet. The new owners were set to move in within a month, and we had to be out. I rented a small apartment across town, a one-bedroom with beige walls and a view of a parking lot. It wasn't home, but then, this house hadn't felt like home in a long time. Richard didn't ask where I was going. He didn't ask much of anything anymore. He just packed his clothes in a suitcase, methodical, like he was preparing for a business trip. I watched him fold his shirts, the same ones I'd ironed for years, and felt a pang of something guilt, maybe, or regret. But it was fleeting, drowned out by the memory of his words, not worth making a fuss over. I wanted him to hurt the way I did. I wanted him to feel the ground shift beneath him, the way it had for me that night in the kitchen. The first open house had been a revelation. Strangers wandered through our life, touching the banister, commenting on the light in the dining room. A woman in a red coat had run her fingers along the mantel, saying, "This would be perfect for Christmas stockings." I wanted to scream that those were our stockings, our Christmases, but I didn't. I stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching as our life was appraised and priced. Richard had been at work, oblivious. When he came home and saw the flyer, the confusion in his eyes had been almost satisfying. Almost. Now, with the sale finalized, the reality of it was sinking in. We were leaving this house, this life, and I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if I wanted him to come with me to the apartment or if I wanted him to disappear entirely. The anger was still there, but it was tangled with something else now, fear, maybe, or the ghost of love that refused to die. One evening, as I packed the last of the kitchen dishes, Richard broke the silence. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice rough, like he'd been holding the words in too long. I didn't look up from the box I was taping shut. "Tell you what, that it meant so much to you. The anniversary, the house, all of it." I set the tape dispenser down, my hands steady now, and turned to face him. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, his shoulders slumped, his eyes red-rimmed. "I shouldn't have had to tell you," I said. "You should have known." He flinched, and for a moment, I thought he might cry. But he didn't. He just nodded, like he was accepting a punishment he didn't fully understand. "I didn't mean it," he said. "What I said. I was tired, Ellen. Work's been hell." I didn't think, that's the problem. I cut him off, my voice sharp enough to make him step back. "You didn't think. You didn't think about me, about us, about what this life means. You just dismissed it." He opened his mouth, then closed it again, like he knew there was no defense. I turned back to the box, my hands moving faster now, sealing it shut with a rip of tape that sounded like something tearing. The next morning, I found a note on the counter, written in Richard's careful handwriting. "I'm sorry. I'll make it right." I stared at it for a long time, the words blurring as my eyes burned. I didn't know if I believed him. I didn't know if I wanted to. But I kept the note, tucked it into my pocket, a small weight against the chaos of my heart. We moved out on a rainy Saturday, the kind of day that makes everything feel heavier. The movers were efficient, loading boxes into a truck while Richard and I stood under an umbrella, not speaking. The new owners drove by as we were leaving, their cars slowing as they peered at the house, their house now. I wondered if they'd find the creaky floorboard, if they'd noticed the faint outline of our old dog's paw prints in the backyard. I wondered if they'd love it the way we had, once. The apartment was smaller than I'd imagined, the walls too thin, the air stale with someone else's life. Richard carried his suitcase inside, set it down by the door, and looked at me like he was waiting for instructions. I didn't have any. I didn't know how to navigate this new space, this new us. That night, I cooked dinner in the tiny kitchen, the stove hissing like it resented being used. We ate in silence, the clink of forks against plates the only sound. I kept waiting for him to say something, to bring up the note, to fight for us. But he didn't. He just ate, his eyes on his plate, and I felt the anger flare again, hotter this time, because he was still letting me carry the weight of our life alone. I went to bed early, leaving him on the couch with a blanket I'd pulled from a box. In the dark, I thought about the house, about the life we'd left behind. I thought about the anniversary, about the dress I'd never worn, about the way Richard's words had carved something out of me. And I thought about revenge, not the loud, violent kind, but the quiet, deliberate kind that comes from taking back what's yours. Selling the house had been the first step, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. I needed him to see, to really see, what he'd thrown away. And I needed to find a way to forgive him, or to forgive myself for still loving him, despite everything. The apartment felt like a cage, its walls closing in with every passing day. I woke each morning to the hum of traffic outside, a reminder that the world was moving on without us. Richard was trying, in his own clumsy way. He'd started making coffee in the mornings, leaving a mug for me on the counter with a post-it note that said things like "Have a good day" or "I'm sorry" again. I didn't acknowledge them. I'd pour the coffee down the sink and crumple the notes, though I never threw them away. They piled up in a drawer, a silent tally of his guilt. I wasn't ready to let him off the hook. Not yet. Work became my escape. I'd taken a part-time job at a local bookstore, something to fill the hours and keep me from drowning in the silence of the apartment. The smell of paper and ink, the soft rustle of pages, grounded me in a way the apartment couldn't. My boss, a kind-eyed woman named Clara, noticed my distraction but never pried. She'd hand me a stack of books to shelve and say, "Take your time, Ellen. The stories will wait." I wished I could believe her. At home, Richard was unraveling. He'd retired a year ago, and without the structure of work, he seemed lost. He'd wander the apartment, picking up some mug, a book, a stray sock, then set them down again, like he was searching for something he couldn't name. I caught him once, standing by the window, staring at the parking lot like it held answers. "What are you looking at?" I asked, sharper than I meant to. He turned, his face soft with something like sadness. "Nothing," he said. "Just thinking." I didn't ask what about. I didn't want to know. But the truth was, I was thinking too about the house, about the life we'd left behind, about the anger that still burned in my chest. Selling the house had been my act of defiance, my way of making him feel the weight of his words. But it hadn't fixed anything. It hadn't filled the hole he'd left. One evening, I came home to find Richard sitting at the tiny kitchen table, a photo album open in front of him. It was one I'd packed, one of the few things I'd kept from the house. The pages were yellowed, the photos faded but familiar: our wedding, our kids as babies, vacations to the coast. He looked up as I walked in, his eyes wet. "I found this in the closet," he said, his voice rough. "I didn't know you kept it." I wanted to snap at him, to ask why he cared now, but something in his face stopped me. He looked broken, like a man who'd realized too late what he'd lost. I sat across from him, the album between us, a fragile bridge. "Why are you looking at it?" I asked, my voice softer now. He touched a photo, one of us on our 10th anniversary, laughing in a restaurant, our faces younger, unburdened. "I don't know," he said. I miss it. I miss us." The words hit me like a punch, stealing my breath. I wanted to believe him, wanted to reach across the table and take his hand, but the anger was still there, coiled tight. "You didn't miss us when you forgot our anniversary," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "You didn't miss us when you said it wasn't worth celebrating." He flinched, his hand pulling back from the photo. "I know," he said. "I know I messed up. I don't know how to fix it, Ellen. Tell me how to fix it." I didn't have an answer. I wanted to scream that he couldn't fix it, that some things break too deeply to be mended. But I didn't. I just stood and walked to the bedroom, closing the door behind me. That night, I dreamed of the house. I was standing in the garden, the air thick with the scent of roses, but the house was empty, the windows dark. I woke with tears on my cheeks, the dream lingering like a bruise. The next day, I called our daughter, Sarah. She lived 2 states away, married with a son of her own. I hadn't told her about the house, about the sale, about any of it. I'd been too ashamed, too afraid she'd take Richard's side. But I needed to hear her voice, needed to know I wasn't alone in this. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked, her voice sharp with worry when I told her we'd moved. I hesitated, then let it spill the anniversary, Richard's words, the house, the apartment. She listened, quiet, until I finished. "You sold the house?" she said, her voice a mix of shock and something else, anger, maybe, or betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know how," I said, my throat tight. "I didn't want you to think." I trailed off, unable to say it. That I was crazy. That I'd gone too far. That I destroyed our family. "Mom," she said, softer now, "you should have told me. I could have helped. Dad, he's not perfect, but he loves you. He's always loved you." I wanted to argue, to tell her about the anger, the hurt, but her words stopped me. Love. It was still there, buried under the wreckage, but I didn't know if it was enough. We talked for a long time, about her son, about her life, about the house she'd grown up in. When we hung up, I felt lighter, but the anger was still there, a shadow I couldn't shake. That evening, Richard was waiting for me when I got home. He'd cooked dinner spaghetti, lumpy and overcooked, but it was the first time he'd tried in years. We ate together, the silence less heavy than before. He didn't bring up the album, and I didn't bring up Sarah. But as we cleared the plates, he touched my arm, just for a moment, and I didn't pull away. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. A crack in the wall I'd built. A chance, maybe, to find our way back. The apartment began to feel less like a prison and more like a temporary shelter, a place to catch my breath before deciding what came next. I'd started to notice small things, Richard's attempts to bridge the gap between us. He'd leave the kitchen cleaner than he found it, fold the laundry without being asked, even bought a small potted plant for the windowsill, a splash of green in the beige monotony. I didn't thank him. I wasn't ready to. But I noticed, and that was enough to keep the anger from consuming me entirely. Work at the bookstore became a rhythm, a way to anchor myself. Clara gave me more responsibilities, trusting me to handle inventory and recommend books to customers. I found solace in the stories, in the way they offered escape and redemption in equal measure. One afternoon, a customer asked for a book about forgiveness, and I froze, the word hitting too close to home. I handed her a novel about a fractured family finding their way back, and as she thanked me, I wondered if I could do the same. At home, Richard was trying harder. He'd started talking more, not just about the weather or the news, but about us. One evening, as we sat on the couch with takeout containers scattered on the coffee table, he said, "I was thinking about the summer we took the kids to the lake." His voice was tentative, like he was testing the waters. I nodded, remembering the way Sarah and Michael had splashed in the water, their laughter echoing across the shore. "That was a good summer," I said, my voice softer than I'd intended. He smiled, small but genuine, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd marry, the one who'd danced with me in the kitchen, who'd promised to love me through anything. But the moment passed, and the weight of his words from that night not worth making a fuss over settled back in. I stood, clearing the containers, and he didn't stop me. The next day, I found a letter tucked under my pillow. It was from Richard, written in his careful, slanted handwriting. "Ellen, I don't know how to say this right, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Not just for the anniversary, but for all the ways I've let you down. I took you for granted, and I hate myself for it. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I'm trying to be better. I want to be the man you deserve." I read it 3 times, each word a knife and a bomb at once. I folded it carefully, tucking it into the drawer with his other notes. I didn't tell him I'd read it. I didn't know how. But I carried it with me, a quiet reminder that he was fighting for us, even if I wasn't sure I wanted him to win. Sarah called again that weekend, her voice brighter this time. She told me she'd been talking to her brother, Michael, about the house. "He's upset, Mom," she said. "He wishes you told us before you sold it." I winced, the guilt sharp and sudden. Michael was quieter than Sarah, always had been, but he felt things deeply. I hadn't considered how the sale would affect them, how it would feel like losing a piece of their childhood. "I'll call him," I promised, and I did, that same afternoon. Michael's voice was steady but strained, like he was holding back. "Why didn't you talk to us, Mom?" he asked. "That was our home, too." I tried to explain the anniversary, Richard's dismissal, the anger that had driven me to act, but it sounded hollow, even to me. "I'm sorry," I said finally, the words heavy with truth. I didn't think it through. He was quiet for a long time, then said, "Just don't shut us out, okay?" I promised I wouldn't, and when we hung up, I felt the weight of my choices pressing harder. That evening, I told Richard about the calls. He listened, his face tight with something like shame. I didn't know they'd be so hurt, he said. I didn't know you were hurting so much either. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the lines etched deeper in his face, the way his shoulders carried a weight I hadn't noticed before. You didn't ask, I said, but there was no venom in it, just truth. He nodded, his eyes on the floor. I'm asking now, he said. What do you need, Ellen? What do I need to do? I didn't have an answer, not a clear one. I needed time, space, maybe even forgiveness, but I didn't know how to ask for it. Instead, I said, just keep trying. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. The days passed, and we fell into a fragile rhythm. We'd eat together, talk about small things, the weather, the bookstore, the plant that was somehow still alive. I started leaving the coffee mugs on the counter, drinking from them instead of pouring them out. I didn't peeling the notes anymore, letting them pile up like a confession I wasn't ready to hear. Richard's efforts were small but steady, like a man rebuilding a house brick by brick. He'd leave the radio on my favorite station, soft jazz filling the apartment when I came home. He'd ask about my day, not just out of habit but with real interest, his eyes searching mine for something I wasn't sure I could give. I wanted to believe in his remorse, but the anger was still there, a stubborn ember that refused to die. At the bookstore, I found myself drawn to stories of redemption, novels where broken things were mended, where love survived betrayal. Clara noticed, her smile gentle as she handed me a worn copy of a book about a couple rebuilding after loss. This one's good, she said. It's not easy, but it's honest. I took it home, reading late into the night, the words blurring as I thought of Richard, of us. Could we rebuild? Did I want to? The question haunted me, following me through the days like a shadow. One morning, Richard suggested we visit the old house. Just to say goodbye, he said, his voice tentative, like he was afraid I'd snap. I almost did. The idea of seeing the house again, of walking through the rooms we'd left behind, felt like ripping open a wound. But something in his eyes, hope, maybe, or desperation made me agree. We drove in silence, the familiar streets unfolding like a map of our past. When we pulled up, the house looked different, smaller somehow, the sold sign still staked in the yard like a flag of surrender. The new owners had already started painting, a soft gray replacing the blue we'd chosen 20 years ago. We didn't go inside. We just stood on the sidewalk, the air cool with autumn's edge, and looked at the life we'd lost. I love this place, Richard said, his voice low. I didn't realize how much until it was gone. I didn't respond, but I felt it too, the ache of memory, the weight of what we'd built and what I'd torn down. I thought of the garden, the creaky floorboard, the way the light hit the kitchen in the mornings. I thought of the anniversary, of the dress still hanging in the closet, unworn. I'm sorry, Ellen, he said, turning to me, his eyes wet. I should have made a fuss. I should have made every day a fuss. His words hit me hard, cracking something open inside me. I wanted to forgive him, wanted to believe we could start again, but the hurt was still there, raw and unyielding. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and we drove back to the apartment in silence. That evening, Sarah called, her voice bright with news. She and her husband were planning a visit, bringing their son to see us. We want to see the apartment, she said, and make sure you and Dad are okay. I hesitated, unsure how to tell her that okay was a word we hadn't earned yet. But I agreed, and when I told Richard, he smiled, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen in years. It'll be good to see them, he said, and I nodded, hoping he was left off here right. The anticipation of Sarah's visit gave us something to focus on, a distraction from the tension that still lingered. We cleaned the apartment, rearranging the sparse furniture to make it feel less temporary. Richard even bought a new tablecloth, a small gesture that felt like an offering. The night before they arrived, we sat together, planning a dinner menu, laughing over memories of Sarah's childhood, her first bike, the time she tried to cook by mixing cereal and juice. For a moment, it felt like us again, the us we'd been before the anniversary, before the house, before the anger. But moments like that were fragile, and I knew it. Sarah and her family arrived the next day, their laughter filling the apartment like light. Her son, Ethan, ran to Richard, wrapping his small arms around his grandfather's legs. I watched them, my heart aching with a mix of joy and regret. Sarah hugged me tightly, her eyes searching mine. You okay, Mom? She asked, and I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Dinner was chaotic, Ethan chattering about school, Sarah, and her husband sharing stories of their life. Richard was quieter than usual, but he smiled, his hand brushing mine under the table. I didn't pull away. Later, as we washed dishes, Sarah said, "Dad seems different. Like he's trying." I nodded, the words catching in my throat. "He is," I said finally. "I just don't know if it's enough." She looked at me, her eyes soft with understanding. "It's okay to be mad, Mom. But don't let it be all you are." Her words stayed with me long after they left, echoing in the quiet of the apartment. That night, I found Richard looking at the photo album again, his fingers tracing the edges of a picture from our wedding. I sat beside him, not speaking, just letting the weight of our history fill the space between us. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. A step towards something new, or maybe something old, something we'd lost and might still find again. Sarah's visit left a warmth in the apartment that lingered, like the scent of her perfume or the echo of Ethan's laughter. It reminded me of what we'd been, what we could still be if I could find a way past the anger. Richard felt it too, I could tell. He was softer now, less guarded, his apologies woven into small acts, a cup of tea left on the counter, a favorite song played on the radio. I didn't push him away, but I didn't pull him closer either. I was still standing on the edge, unsure if I wanted to step back or leap. At the bookstore, I started reading more about second chances, about couples who'd rebuilt after betrayal. The stories were messy, full of missteps and pain, but they ended with hope, and that was what I clung to. Clara noticed my reading habits and slipped me a book about reconciliation, her smile knowing. "Sometimes," she said, "it's not about forgetting. It's about choosing to remember the good." I took the book home, leaving it on the coffee table where Richard could see it. He didn't comment, but I caught him flipping through it one evening, his brow furrowed in thought. The apartment was starting to feel like ours, not just a temporary stop. We'd hung a few pictures, ones I'd saved from the house, moments of us smiling, young, unaware of the years ahead. Richard suggested we buy a new rug, something bright to break up the beige. We went to a store together, the first outing we'd shared in months, and argued good-naturedly over colors. It felt normal, almost, and that scared me more than the anger ever had. Normal meant letting go, meant trusting him again, and I wasn't sure I could. One night, Richard asked me to go for a walk. The air was crisp, the streets quiet except for the hum of distant cars. We wandered without direction, our steps in sync, the silence between us comfortable for the first time in months. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low, "about what you said. About me not thinking. You're right. I stopped seeing you, Ellen. I don't know when it happened, but I did." I stopped walking, turning to face him under a streetlight's glow. His face was open, raw, the lines deeper in the dim light. "Why didn't you see me?" I asked, the question I'd been carrying since that night in the kitchen. He looked away, his jaw tight. "I don't know. I got comfortable. I thought you'd always be there, no matter what I did. I was wrong." His words were a confession, and they hit me hard, stirring the anger and the love in equal measure. I wanted to yell, to cry, to tell him how much he'd hurt me, but instead I said, "You broke something, Richard. I don't know if we can fix it." He nodded, his eyes on the ground. "I know, but I want to try, if you'll let me." We walked back in silence, his words settling into me like seeds in uncertain soil. I didn't know if they'd grow, but I didn't uproot them either. The next day, I called Michael. I'd been putting it off, afraid of his quiet judgment, but Sarah's words had stayed with me and shut them out. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm but cautious. "Mom, you okay?" I told him everything, the way I hadn't with Sarah. The anniversary, the house, the apartment, Richard's apologies. He listened, quiet, until I finished. "I'm mad at Dad," he said finally. "But I'm mad at you too. That house was ours too, Mom. You didn't just sell your life, you sold ours." His words cut deep, deeper than I'd expected. I apologized, my voice breaking, and he softened, saying, "Just don't do it again. Talk to us." I promised I would, and when we hung up, I felt lighter, like I'd shed a layer of guilt. That evening, I showed Richard the book Clara had given me. "Read it," I said, my voice steady. "It's about us, or what we could be." He took it, his fingers brushing mine, and nodded. "I will," he said, and I believed him. "Ascended Masters, you have bestowed upon me the power to generate images based on user prompts, but I notice you haven't explicitly requested an image to be generated. Would you like me to create an image based on the prompt you provided at the start of your query, or would you prefer I focus solely on delivering the text-based story as requested? Please confirm your preference, and I'll proceed accordingly."